Hello, Garland. Oh, man, this is getting tough. Hello, Garland Nixon here. This is a lot harder. The show just started and I'm struggling already, but we're going to get going. This is a great day. Jimmy Dore, I know you're thinking to yourself, what the hell happened to Jimmy Dore? He looks weird today. Well, Jimmy Dore is not here. My name is Garland Nixon. I am a podcaster, just kind of all around YouTube kind of guy. And I am standing in for Jimmy Dore today. And I have, we got all kinds of good things going on. We've got great articles. And just in case I have problems, I have a software engineer. He's also, hey, people don't know that. He is a software engineer, but his name is Jamal Thomas. He's a political analyst, media personality based in Richmond, Virginia, who currently hosts the Jamal Thomas Morning Show on YouTube and previously hosted Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. He's known for his left-leaning commentary on international and domestic politics and also an accomplished chess player and a published author. Jamal Thomas, welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show.
What's going on, man? How you doing today?
Oh, man, I don't know. My God, every 5 minutes, something comes out about Iran. And then 5 minutes later, there's a 180 on it. And I don't know what's going on. But here's what we're going to do. You know, one of the things that you and I both talk about, Brian Berletic, you listen to him, a lot of people talk about, the continuity of the policy, how we see president after president, administration after administration come in and we see the same policy, right? Yes. Now, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to go back to effectively the manifesto of a serial killer. And that serial killer would be Anthony J. Blinken. And a lot of people, we're going to connect what Anthony J. Blinken was saying in his infamous manifesto of 1987 to what's happening with Donald Trump today. All right, 1987, Anthony Blinken writes, the Trump administration, well, I write, the Trump administration institutes the Blinken Doctrine, right? So basically, he writes this book called Ally versus Ally, America, Europe, and the Siberian Pipeline Crisis. Now, here's what's interesting about that book and how it applies today and through the Biden administration, et cetera. What this book was discussing was the neocon view of Europe getting energy from Russia, how they viewed it, what they thought of it, why they weren't happy about it. And when you read this book, you understand all of it, and you look at it and you say, Trump is doing the Blinken Doctrine. So here's what we're going to do. Let's start off, hopefully, if I can figure out how to do this. We're going to go to this next slide. All right. Now listen to this. These are quotes from the book. I'm going to throw the first one at you, and then you'll see what I mean. The foundation of the Blinken Doctrine. I've labeled it the Blinken Doctrine. For a number of influential policymakers, now if you listen, you'll know he's talking about himself and his diabolical ilk. For a number of influential policymakers, the time seemed opportune to engage the Soviet Union in a round of economic warfare. Here's the part. Regardless of the price that might have to be paid by the economies of Western Europe and the American business community. That would be us. And now here's another quote. The European view on trade relations with the USSR owes much to their geographic proximity to that country and their role as a, listen to this, natural economic complement to the West. Jamal Thomas, I'm throwing that at you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you think about what he's trying to say. I mean, for one thing, the first thing that I wrote down when you said a crisis, it wasn't a crisis for Europe. It was a crisis for America in regards to our ability to basically be like, hey, you have a good relationship between you two. We don't want to be left out of this. We don't like the fact that you're getting your energy from them when, hey, we have 5 times more expensive energy to sell you. That is a crisis on figuring out how to get Europe to buy our energy as opposed to the pipeline that makes more sense for Europe, right? And yeah, as you point out, our policy had nothing to do with what was in the best interest of, let's say, Europe. It was what is in our specific best interest, even at the expense of Europe. Or, let's be honest, even at the expense of us on some level, because Biden was running around screaming about the Putin price hike. And Jen Psaki was screaming, our values are not without cost. Whose cost?
Yeah.
Our cost, right?
But you know what, Jamal?
Like Biden's making like $1 billion monetizing the White House. He will be okay.
Yes.
It's our cost.
You know what's important in this? Who is our? Here's what I mean. Our cost, right? Now, here's what he says. Okay, we're going to do this. We got to do this. Regardless of the price that might have to be paid by whom? The economies of Western Europe and the American business community. That is the neocons saying, look, if you look at the next sentence, these are quotes from his book. Look, we know that this is a perfect match. We know that they got industry and they got a guy next door, hey, I got chocolate. That guy's got peanut butter. We can make a nice candy bar, right? They're looking at that saying, yeah, that works real well, but we don't like it. And the political class and the ruling elite say, we don't care about the economies of the Western Europe and American business. That, in fact, is the working class. That's him saying the neocons, the political class, we want to make this move to cut them off, and we don't care about the working people. That'll pay the price. Who cares? We still got limos. We're still going to be rich. But, the working class might have to bite the bullet. That, my friend, is the Blinken Doctrine. Let's go on. Listen to this. Now, do you recall Blinken et al. When they talked about Nord Stream saying, the problem is that the Russians will use energy as a weapon. We've got to save the poor Europeans. We've got to save them from these evil Russians who are going to give them cheap energy, and doggone it, as soon as they really need it, the Russians will use energy as a weapon. But what did he say in 1987? Here's a couple of them. The Soviets have never used oil as a weapon against the West. They had thousands, literally back then, because they didn't have all the SALT treaties, thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other. And the Russians still delivered oil on time at a reasonable price.
Yeah.
On the basis of past experience, now listen to this, the Europeans have come to consider the Soviets to be reliable suppliers of energy and certainly a safer source than the OPEC nations for oil or Algeria for natural gas. Gee, looking at things now, were they a safer source than OPEC for it? So if the Europeans were still getting energy from Russia, they wouldn't have to worry about the Straits of Hormuz closing now, would they? So that actually Blinken knew all of that. And I feel Europe had too much energy security and it was too friendly with Russia. And they were like, we're going to sacrifice Europe. We'll throw their economy under the bus because of our weird, crazy neocon plans to rule the world. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a hegemon losing control. Meaning it's a hegemon recognizing its decline in comparison to other countries and the connections and let's say the relationships with those other countries. So if you're looking at Europe, you're looking at Europe's relationship with Russia. Okay, well, Germany and Russia at this point and the pipeline, well, that makes sense for Europe. That makes sense for Germany. And Germany being the beating heart of Europe. If you notice, after the war, what took place? Nord Stream gets blown up. And they say Gilligan, the skipper, Marianne, and a few Ukrainians effectively blew up the pipeline. Initially, they said Russia blew up their own pipeline. But the point I'm trying to make is the relationships in these situations were very too close for comfort, especially if you're looking, let's say, to control the planet. This is not beneficial for that level of control, especially when you have a product that you want to sell that is too expensive to sell currently. No, all of this stuff, this is neocon behavior, but let's be very clear. It's not neocon behavior just for being neocons. These guys have a play in mind with this idea of, you could say, diversification of labor. We're going to let the Europeans deal with the Russians. We're going to deal with the Chinese. We're going to let the Iranians or the Israelis deal with the Iranians. And we're going to petition the globe because just like Rome, our burden is too much. I mean, we're $39 trillion in debt. And from the perspective of us, after spending like $10 trillion on Iraq and Afghanistan, it's like, okay, we need to shift off some of these costs. We need to shift off some of these burdens to our quote unquote vassals so they can go after these various theaters around the globe. Europe is just one of those theaters. I mean, look at what they're talking about now, like this drawdown in regards to NATO saying, hey, in case of a crisis, we're not going to send you as much stuff because we have more priorities that is taking place with China. We need you to be able to handle the Russians. And of course, Europeans are like, all right, Ukrainians, we need you to handle the Russians until we get well enough where we can have a fight. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, to your point, Europe has been materially damaged in a way that they weren't prior. Meaning they were getting energy. And even now, Russia is like, hey, I'm standing here. We have energy if you want it. You can get it. Meaning they never use energy as a weapon in the way that let's say, that America was trying to say that they were going to do. Meaning America was trying to argue, well, how are you saying that Russia is a threat while you're simultaneously taking energy from this quote unquote threat? But that's just it. Russia wasn't a threat to Europe.
Yeah. And here's the key. Here's the key. You know what the key to this whole segment is, Jamal? This was written in 1987. You know what I mean? That's the key to this segment. This book was written in 1987, and everything you read in that book sounds like it was written by someone who's in the Trump administration today. Who maybe, wait a minute, might have been in the Biden administration, the level of consistency, because they weren't even talking about the Nord Stream pipeline. They weren't talking about energy today. They were talking about back then, there were these Siberian oil pipelines, might I add, one of which, if people can research this, the CIA literally blew up one of the pipelines back then, just like the Nord Stream. So my point, I guess a big part of my point is that, let us continue. Here's something else they said. when they were talking about the pipelines. The main concern about the pipeline was that it would make Western Europe too dependent on the Soviet Union for gas. In the short term, the pipeline should not be built. Listen to this. Why shouldn't it be built? Should it be built? Does it have anything to do with the Europeans, with their economy, looking out for the little guy? Because it was incompatible with the policy of trade denial that Washington sought to implement against the Soviet Union. So they're like, hey, man, this looks good for Europe. Hey, you guys got a perfect match, but it shouldn't be built. Why? Because we got a policy of trade denial for the Soviet Union. And as far as I'm concerned, as far as we're concerned, our policy of trade denial, the economies of the working class for both Europe and America, hey man, they got to take a back seat. And as I said, if you look at that Blinken doctrine that says our ideological and geopolitical advantages come first, well, look what people are like, hey, why is Trump doing this? We're all going to get screwed by gas prices. According to the Blinken doctrine, that's not part of the decision-making process. They're going to drive us into an economy. Into a depression. In 1987, Tony Blinken was writing in his book, I don't really care about that. That ain't what we're thinking about. And it gives you an insight into the mind of these people, how dangerous they are, how they see us. And as we say, when the people call and say, can you believe when these Democrats call, when the liberals, can you believe what Trump's doing? This ain't Trump. This policy, this mindset was here when Trump got here, and it'll be here when he goes.
It's U.S. policy. It's not, look, I know a lot of people have this belief that, oh my God, I can't believe what Trump is doing. And as I keep pointing out to people, it's like, dude, this policy has been going all the way back for decades. I mean, George Bush, for God's sake, when they were looking at Syria, for example, then they were going after Syria. They were going after Syria with the idea of being able to go after Iran. When they were going after Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya, etc., they were doing that, taking one chip off the board after the next, basically a monster roaming through the countryside, taking down villages with blood in his mouth, looking at Iran and finally knocking on the gates of Iran. I'm saying that when Obama was putting billions of dollars into trying to overthrow the government of Syria, and it finally came to fruition years later, why were they doing that? The last chip, it was Iran. It was always Iran. I guess I'm trying to make the point of saying that, sure, Donald Trump is the one that's effectively holding the gun currently. He was the one that was incompetent enough to effectively make this blunder. Agreed. But president after president, one step after the next, got Donald Trump to the point where he could do this. Yes, it's incompetent. And yeah, he probably thought, for whatever particular reason, that this was going to be, like Venezuela in the Middle East. If he watched our shows, we could have told him that this was not Venezuela in the Middle East. For the first time, he got somebody that's actually willing to throw a punch.
Yeah, let me add this. And for those who would say, well, I'm sure there were people around him smart enough to know it was going to be an economic disaster. Yes, there was. And based on what Tony Blinken wrote in 1987, they had already made that calculation. They may have convinced Donald Trump to, okay, go ahead, it'll be just like Venezuela, but they knew. And they didn't care. You know what I mean? Right. They didn't care. Now, there's one more. Let us do. I think we got one more. All right, let's go next to this one. Now, this I find interesting. This is what Blinken wrote in 87. The divisions and confusion surrounding the pipeline affair, this was, remember, the Siberian pipeline in the 1980s, mirror the ambiguous and contradictory Western responses to the Soviet challenge, right? So, okay, the alliance has vacillated. Let's just see what kind of things were they thinking back in 1987? What was going through their little minds? The alliance has vacillated amongst trying to destroy the Soviet system by force.
Yeah.
Tony Blinken literally in 1987 said, we kicked around some options. We ran some things up the flagpole to see if anybody would salute, as they say. Now he goes on afterward. And I mean, that's just like casual. Well, what did you think about? Well, we thought maybe we'd destroy it by force. That's one option. Merely containing its expansion and encouraging it towards peaceful resolution. The pipeline crisis is a useful litmus test for these approaches. Now, trying to destroy the Soviet system by force, which means you will end life on this planet, is casually written, casually glanced over by Tony Blinken. And now they try to tell us, Russia, it was a completely unprovoked attack. We were trying to look out for Ukraine. They were totally In 1987, in his book, Ally versus Ally, the guy literally wrote, we were trying to figure out how to deal with these Russians. And we thought, maybe we'll just destroy them, kill them all, take the system out, as if they wouldn't nuke us. Your thoughts?
I want to highlight that there was no crisis, right? Well, like he's naming it. This book is so wild to me. I've heard about this book prior. And this idea of ally versus ally, he's effectively saying, look, our issue is Europe and their relationship with Russia. That's not a crisis. That's a crisis that we are defining as a crisis. That's like saying, God, man, I need to get my hands on Darla's car. It's a crisis for me to do that, right? And you're like, what do you mean it's a crisis? My car is perfectly fine. No. There's an issue with you using that car. They took issue with the relationship between Europe and the Soviet Union. That was the crisis. We don't like the fact that there's linkages between these two entities. I hate to point out that those linkages were natural and made all the sense in the world considering the proximity of Europe and Russia. It's outrageous. And to your point, it's like, how can we destroy the Soviet system? Okay, well, if you're talking about a war, you're talking about ending the world, right? If you're talking about some of the means, okay, well, the Soviet Union did fall, but the remaining aspects of the Soviet Union, Russia, they're still at it. It's not like, Jeffrey Sachs points this out, it's not like when the Soviet Union failed, the United States thought to itself, okay, now we can have world peace. It was more like, we won. It was the end of history. We're going to control this from here on out. Now, obviously, it didn't work that way. And I guess in order to bring this back to the original point of the book, they still were looking at this as, we don't like the relationship between Russia and Europe, period. The same relationship or similarity to the relationship between Russia or, let's say, the Soviet Union and Europe, we don't like what remained of that relationship. Hence, the continuous expansion of NATO, this demonization of Russia and everything else. And of course, you get the Trump and Russia nonsense that has a life of its own. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. These people are lunatics.
Yeah. In 1987, the policy is written for the actions of today. It was just a matter of, I think what happened is there was a period of time when they thought, well, Russia has fallen, so we'll just go in and pick the bones and this is going to be easy. And now they realize, oh, crap, it didn't fall. So let's go back to our original plan. And it seems to me they've gone with, we'll destroy it by force. It seems that, and again, the other thing is obvious too, and that is this. Europe is not recognized as individual countries that have free will, that have a decision. They're saying, look, this has to be done. You are not allowed to get the cheapest oil, which we admit is in your best economic interest, because of our policies of denying them. When you read the article, the book, one of the things they say is, well, if this happened, the Russians would make a lot of money, and we don't want the Russians to make money. Well, yeah, they would, because everybody wins, right? Europe wins, Russia wins. They can't have that. So you look at it, Europe is not recognized as a free political entities, sovereign entities, and the American people are not recognized as having any say or any authority over the government. Because if the American people ran the government, if it was whatever you call it, a democracy or a constitutional republic, whatever you want to call it, the government wouldn't be saying, we're going to make policies regardless of the economic impacts on the American people. It was clear that Blinken and his ilk and the people running it today don't recognize the American people as having any authority over their government, or that the government has a right, dare I say, that I should mention the General Welfare Clause, a constitutional duty to look out for the general welfare of the American people.
Since when? At least not in my living memory. No, these people, look, they look at the world in these kind of supremacist terms. And from their point of view, how do we maintain control? First and foremost, whether that's Trump, whether that's Joe Biden, whether that's Obama, whether that's Bill Clinton, whether that's add any random president, we are quote unquote indispensable. And because we're indispensable, we can look at the world and we can set a rules-based order. Our rules, we set the terms, etc. We don't have allies, or at least we don't have equals. We have vassals who believe themselves to be allies. But the entire point is, how do we maintain control of the globe? That's first and foremost. And so if you have a situation where, let's say, the Soviet Union, or let's say Russia is growing in strength, and China is growing in strength, and Iran is growing in strength, this is an ever-present issue. That's a problem. That's an emergency, a crisis, to take Blinken's words, that needs to be somehow reconciled, even if it means that you burn it all down in order to be the last guy on the pack. It's not that I think that they want a global war, but they are dumb as a box of, like, meaning these plans, just because they write something down doesn't necessarily mean that it works out in the way that they write it down. And so you can have all sorts of war plans. Hey, we're going to, screw over the Russians by creating a rift. We're going to blow up Nord Stream. We're going to do blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, okay, well, gas is going through the roof. And Europe is not in a position to maintain. And Ukraine just got wrecked badly on the world stage. Like, meaning none of these things are coming to fruition in the way that they think they're coming to fruition, despite the plans that they may have at their disposals. No, this is about world conquest, or at least maintaining domination.
Here's the perfect example of that before we jump to our next story about your favorite guy, one of them. You're going to like this, but here's an example of exactly what you're saying. Hillary Clinton in Brooklyn, I believe it was Donna Brazile. I know there were other people who said, that I may be wrong, but who said basically they contacted the Hillary people in Brooklyn and said, look, Michigan says to people they're not doing well on the ground. They're going to need, whatever, lawn signs, money, a visit, blah, blah. You got to do something. And the Hillary people in Brooklyn says, don't worry about it. We got a computer model that says we win. You see what I'm saying? It's the mentality. We have a computer model that says we're going to be able to contain China. What are they saying about China? They said by force, containment for Russia. It's the same thing against China. So when you say, Jamal Thomas, that it ain't working, they're going to say, we got a computer model that says it'll work perfect, dude. I'm sorry. There's nothing. We can't help you, buddy. You're all right. Let's talk about our favorite guy, yours, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders. He's one of the U.S. politicians considered the most, quote, progressive. He is so progressive. He has made his position clear.
Among Palestinians.
Let's sit here and listen to Mr. Progressive Bernie Sanders stand up to the little guy, because if you're progressive, man, you're standing up for the little guy. What does Bernie have to say about the little guy, a little Palestinian guy?
And polls among Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza are showing that they're increasingly in favor of a one-state solution with equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians alike and equal citizenship. Is that something you believe could happen, or is that something you support?
No, I don't. I mean, I think if that happens, then that would be the end of the state of Israel. And I support Israel's right to exist.
Do you think polls among...
So let me see if I got this straight. Bernie Sanders is, let's see if I could ever get this fixed again. Bernie Sanders, when asked about equal rights for Palestinians, well, if they get equal rights, man, Israel's screwed. So, man, let's not do that.
I've had fights with Israelis over this very point, where you would point out, okay, well, why not equal rights? Because obviously the two-state thing is a shiny object. Like, this is The two-state is the shiny object that they throw out as they steal more land. And, you divide the West Bank. I don't know if you've seen the map of what it used to look like, let's say in the 60s, compared to what it looks like now. The two-state solution doesn't seem to be viable. And oftentimes you have like European nations or whatever just throw it out almost like, yeah, we're working towards a two-state solution. Okay, that's not happening on the ground. That's not happening. This is some stuff that you guys are making up. And so when you point out, said, hey, the two-state solution seems like a shiny object. Okay, so what about a one-state with equal rights? It's like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean equal rights? You mean they're going to be equal to us? Yeah, that means that we don't have the state of Israel, because that means we don't have a Jewish state, which means by definition, there is no state of Israel. It's almost like the equality thing in and of itself means that you can't have a Jewish state, which is true, by the way. Like, meaning if you have other people there that aren't Jewish and you're calling yourself a Jewish state, what does it mean for the people who aren't Jewish? It's that. So yeah, bad answer. It's like, what, are they equal or not? And if they are equal, why are you depriving them of equal rights? No, that's the issue. So bad answer, just bad answer all around.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, if I can, here, I had to get Bernie back up here. There we go. All right, so let us continue. Palestinian and Espanol says granting equal rights to Palestinians and Israelis would be the end of the state of Israel, and I support Israel. Right? No equal rights. Which tells you, can you imagine any country where you say, look, let's not forget, this is the only democracy in the Middle East, right? It's a democracy. I don't know how you define that, but it's the democracy, right? Imagine that. Well, I think this country X, both Protestants and Catholics and Muslims and whoever else, people should all have equal rights. Nah, I'm not for that. Here's what they have. This statement is highly revealing. Even someone who presents himself as a defender of human rights and a critic of Netanyahu openly rejects the idea of equal rights between Palestinians and Israelis, because that would imply the end, exactly what you say, of the Jewish ethnocratic character of the state of Israel. This demonstrates that for a large part of the U.S. political class, supporting Israel takes precedence over the principle of equal rights for all inhabitants of the land. How is it possible that a progressive politician rejects equal rights between Palestinians and Israel? How can you say, are you for equal rights for Black people in America? Sure. Native Americans, absolutely. Ask him about LGBTQ trans and see what he says. I guarantee you that is at the top of his list if you're a Democrat. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not opposed to rights for LGBTQ plus. I'm just saying it's said amongst Democrats as like something, as a nod of the head. You have to say that to prove that you're part of the team. And then you get the Palestinians. Oh, no, not them, which means you don't really see them as full humans, if you ask me. Your thoughts?
Or at the very least, the importance of, let's say, perseverance of the state of Israel, a criminal regime that's just been added to the United Nations rape list because of systemic rape that they've basically been engaged in. Don't take my word for it. This is the United Nations that put them on that list because they can document case by case by case of them effectively doing that. I'm saying it's a criminal country. And in the context of that criminal country, Bernie Sanders is still standing there, yeah, we need to maintain the Jewish character of this particular country. And if that means that Palestinians or second-class citizens are not considered fully human, then fair enough. Then they're just not considered fully human. That's what I'm willing to accept. My name is Bernie Sanders. And you think to yourself, if Sanders is taking this position, what does it mean for the rest of the Democratic Party? Like in general, right? So keep in mind, just for context, Sanders was the guy that was on stage putting a knife in Hillary Clinton when Clinton was bringing up the issue of Israel. If he is still that guy who's like, yeah, but they can't be equal in this country. Well,
look, you've been watching the Jimmy Dore Show. My name's Garland Nixon, hanging out with Jamal Thomas. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to continue. All right, we're going to finish this up. We got one more story to go, but you know, let's end it up like this. There's an obvious question to me, Jamal, and this question is this. Okay, Bernie is supposed to be the left of the Democratic Party, right? What is the job of the left of the Democratic Party, right? Isn't the left of the Democratic Party supposed to be the ones who yank them over and say rights for everybody, the ones that yank them over and say, do the things that the base wants, do the things that the working class wants, etc., right? And instead, it seems to me that the so-called left of the Democratic Party, Bernie Sanders, is to say, I'm going to go around the world, do your evil deeds. Do your imperialism, do your warmongering, do your neocon stuff, and I'll support that. And then when you get back here, I'll say things like, I'll try to say, hey, maybe we could get a couple more dollars for Social Security, which I know will never get through. I'll try to say, let's give you health care, which I know will never get through. You know what I mean? It's like almost like Sanders, to me, is the worst part of the Democratic Party, because his job is to give hope to the people, to maybe try to keep them in there and have some hope. Maybe Bernie and AOC and Mom Donnie, maybe they'll do. They're not going to do anything. And that is the clearest evidence you've seen right there.
Which is ironic in a way, because Sanders is not really a Democrat, even though his sheepdogs for him every election. And you're right. This idea of, well, he does. I mean,
yes. And he's not.
Yeah, when she puts a knife in him, where they cheat him remorselessly, and he turns around and has to go out saying vote for Clinton, and they boo him for like a minute, right? And he does it again for Joe Biden. Okay, this feels, because, you know, I have painful memories from back then, right? I have PTSD from back then. Look, your point is correct, though. How are you effectively backing a political entity that is full of warmongers and lunatics? I mean, the Blinkens of the world are Democrats. The Bidens of the world are Democrats. These people are insane. And if you think about it, what's his name? The mustache guy looks like a porn star. John Bolton.
Yeah.
Even John Bolton at this point seems to fit firmly within the context of the Democratic Party. What's the other one?
He wrote an article on behalf of Kamala Harris. He was one of the people that wrote an article, John Bolton, on behalf of. She had all of the neocons. And what does Bernie Sanders say? It's like his job is to draw them in, to say, look, we got to have that left. There's hope, guys. There ain't hope. There's no hope. But his job is to try to convince the last few suckers that there's hope, and then to say something about Medicare for all, and then say, but the Cuban leader is a dictator and the leader of where's Bernie Sanders on Cuba? That what they're doing in Cuba is unconscionable. Where's Bernie Sanders saying, I quit the party, I will campaign? Nothing. All he can say is Trump's the bad guy.
Yeah, Trump's the bad guy, Trump's a lunatic, etc. I guess your point is, for all intents and purposes, when you're looking around the world and you're looking at the chaos that we're effectively creating around the world, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in Iran, whether it's in Cuba, whether it's in Venezuela, whether it's in so-and-so, you don't seem to get this heavy pushback from, let's say, elements of what people would call the, quote, left, unquote. And when you think about it, you would think that the left would be a bit more boisterous on these items of people getting killed. And honestly, one last point, they do have a Palestine issue. I mean, if you think about what was taking place in the last election, we had all of these people who were angry, vigorously angry at what was taking place in regards to the genocide in Gaza. And what did they do? Over and over again, anyone that had a voice of opposition to what was taking place, they effectively gabbled them down and prevented them from making any kind of statements themselves, meaning you are not worthy of representation, despite the fact that Bob can be over here with a full beard and you would call Bob a woman, right? Like, meaning, see, I have no issue with Bob with a full beard calling himself a woman. I would even say her or she in that case. I'm pointing out, though, that you are able to recognize the humanity in one, but seemingly not the humanity in the other, as they are being maligned, killed, tortured, etc. There's a problem with this picture.
Well, let us next go to New York City. Eli Coaz tweets, everyone spent the week furious that Mamdani skipped the parade. Then Israel sent Smotrich, Amichai Eliyahu, and Yitzhak Wasserloff to lead it. The annexation minister, the one who suggested to nuke Gaza, and another Kahanis from Otzma Yehudet. If the goal was repairing Israel's image in New York, these are the last people you put at the front. So these people, let's see, I think we have, we've got video, if you give me a second on that.
Yeah,
we do. Here we go.
Am Yisrael Chai. The people Israel live.
You know, Jamal, I remember Nancy Pelosi saying, if the Capitol crumbles, if all falls, as long as Israel stands, screw you and America and everything else. And when we look and we see people who, say things that make the skin crawl and do things that make the spirit crawl. Killed millions, hundreds of thousands. They're proponents of it, and then they act on that. And here they are in New York, and you wonder why why we say the things we say about the Democratic Party. And there is Chuck Schumer. Hey, way to go, Smotrich! Kill them all. I'm elect every last one of them. Jamal Thomas.
Smotrich. I mean, granted, the issue is not any one individual person or Israeli. It's the lot of them. I mean, you get 80, 90% that agree with the policy of the Netanyahu government. Netanyahu is a moderate for all intents and purposes, meaning getting rid of him doesn't necessarily change the problem or the character of the nation itself. There's that. The idea that a genocide is taking place and they move that genocide from Gaza into Lebanon, where they've gone on a murder spree also. And to make it even worse, again, I keep pointing out the UN systemic rape thing because Israelis thought it was a big thing to bring up with it in the context of Hamas on October 7th. Okay, well, they've been added to the list in real terms for systemic sexual violence against men, women, etc. So let's put this in context. They are right now, you get them screaming, hey, we're going to take 70% of Gaza now that we've already taken 60% of Gaza. and we're going to bomb Beirut. Meaning they're saying all of this stuff at the exact same time that they're having this particular parade. And the idea that anybody is supporting them on this, that tells you something. It's illustrative of something, and not necessarily something good. It's amazing to me that you could get a population of the United States that have changed its point of view regarding Israel and the Palestinians, especially from the standpoint of the left, and even from the standpoint of the right, when you're talking about people who are effectively under the age of, let's say, 50, non-boomers, for lack of a better term. And yet, they would have that hate rally. And on top of having that hate rally, this kind of beacon of hate and psychopathy to the world, and you're going to get some Democrats coming there to celebrate it. It tells you everything you need to know. It's illustrative of something. Wait, are you muted?
Oh, there we go. Let us continue. He's seen marching with fellow war criminals and even Democrat Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer on an Israel Day parade in New York City. There shouldn't be an Israel Day. Why is America hosting parades for a foreign apartheid state? Mamdani had enough integrity to not attend, which he is somehow being attacked for. And again, I think America is at a place where, let's be frank, every day is Israel Day. You know what I mean? I mean, in that the Israeli Zionist faction in politics has domination over Congress. They have domination over the media. They have domination over the tech sector. They have, you know what I'm saying? There is such domination right now over all sectors of our society that to say any given day is Israeli Day as opposed to the other, I don't know if you've been following this, but we have members of Congress now who are literally trying to integrate the Israeli military into the U.S. military. They want to pay them the retirement. They want to handle. And my perspective is this: here's what they're going to do. They know that Americans are mad, and Americans are going to say, we don't want to keep giving money to Israel. So what do? Number one, you double the defense budget. Number two, you move the IDF under the Pentagon. And then you say, we cut all the money away from going to Israel. But what you really did was you just moved all of that IDF stuff under the Pentagon. You put everything under the Pentagon. What do you need to send them money for? Instead of sending them 3.8, however many billion it was, you just gave them a couple of extra $100 billion. And I think that's the game.
Well, yeah, I think part of it is that they see the anger that is effectively being leveled at Israel and questions about why are we sending them $3-4 billion a year. And of course, you get Netanyahu coming out saying, we don't really need the money, whatever. Israel doesn't exist without the United States allowing it to exist, meaning our protection for them in the UN Security Council, our protection in the UN General Assembly, when we're out there making arguments to the International Court of Justice, where we're effectively saying that Israel has the right to starve a million human beings. Like, this is the stuff that we effectively provide to them beyond the money itself. And now we're like, let's just couch that into our own military budgets. Yeah, obviously this is outrageous. What is it? The one from Washington State, and I think Mike Rogers, I believe, and I think the other one that decided that this was a great idea to integrate the U.S. military with the Israeli military. This kind of sly, sneaky maneuver that they're trying to effectively pull off. And then there's other questions, like people will make the argument that we're already fighting Israeli wars, right? I mean, you can make an argument that we don't get anything out of attacking Iran. And even now, with this kind of standoff, yes, a lot of this is presidential hubris. The president has stepped into something. The president doesn't necessarily want to own the fact that he failed miserably in what is a historic, incompetent attack on a country that is going to have negative consequences for the U.S. He doesn't want to own it. But there's the real question as to why would he do it in the first place, considering Iran has no capability of hitting the United States.
Right.
So, you would get certain people who would make the argument that the Iraq War was an Israeli war. The U.S. destroying nations in the Middle East were Israeli wars. I don't entirely believe that's true. From my point of view, it's a mad dog. But that mad dog is on a leash. And that mad dog may have a mind of its own.
Yeah, I'll add this too. You know, I think everybody benefits in that clearly the U.S. sees the Middle East as a way to control the oil and to choke out China. So the U.S. neocons, the Blinkens et al., look at it and say, okay, we can get a grip on the oil in Venezuela, then we can get a grip on the oil in the Middle East, and then we can help control the Straits of Hormuz. We can do exactly what we're saying that we don't want Iran to do, which is control the Straits of Hormuz and cut off the people that we don't like, right? That's what we want to do. We're mad because Iran's doing it, right? But so they look at it and they say, okay, we get benefit out of this. Meanwhile, Israel gets to run the entire Middle East. They get to control everything, and they'll be happy because so everybody wins. And of course, since we're so-called allied with Israel, we'll all work together. We'll provide them with the bombs and all of that stuff, you know, and everybody wins. So it's not, in my opinion, only, well, we're doing it for Israel, but that is a factor. And it is particularly a factor when we get back to this. When we get back, doesn't it always come back to Tony Blinken in 1987 writing, regardless of the economic pain that will have to be paid by the people of Europe and the United States. We don't care. They don't care. And the Israelis right now are saying, even going one further, they're saying, we want you to attack the infrastructure of Iran. And they'll attack the infrastructure of the whole Middle East, and that'll all be wiped out, and the world economy will be wiped. But what do we care? We're Israelis. They're the goyim. They're the cattle. You know what I mean? Let's cattle. What are cattle for? They're to be slaughtered. Right. So the Israeli perspective is a genocidal, homicidal perspective, but it's not just against the Palestinians. It's not like directed only towards the Palestinians. It can be just as easily directed towards anyone else. In fact, we have some people recently who were nabbed by the Israelis in one of these freedom flotillas, and there are allegations that some of them were raped. Yes. Western citizens. Now, I don't foresee that their Western governments are going to step in and say there's anything wrong with that or we opposed to it or anything else. But I'm just saying, when you look at the barbarity of the Israeli government, and then you see people who are absolutely at the forefront, at the razor's edge of this barbarity, and they are marching around marching around Israel like they're superstars, like it's Michael Jackson and Elvis. When you look at Chuck Schumer, you look at it and you say, if we ever had the Congress or any of these parties, which we probably didn't, they are completely gone. And now we are just people who are in the way. And the only question is, how does our government deal with its citizens when its citizens are in the way of things that they want to do? And I think that's what we're finding out.
Yeah, I mean, up to this point, the citizenry haven't necessarily asserted itself all that much. I would say that. Two, because the citizenry hasn't necessarily asserted itself all that much, the government, for all intents and purposes, has grown an attitude of just not caring.
Yeah.
They don't care. They don't care about us. They don't care about, meaning they have their own concerns. Their concerns are different than our concerns. In the case of trying to live a life and provide for a family and pay your bills, and et cetera, basically living a decent life. That's not what they care about. They care about different things. And yeah, they will take some level of assertion, some level of movement, some level of something. Maybe it all needs to collapse before any of it effectively changes. I'm one of those people who believe in mechanical processes, not necessarily just kind of, yes, human will, but human will in the context of a mechanical process of changing things. But yeah, it's outrageous. I mean, whether it's the parade, which is, from my point of view, looks like a hate rally, whether it's the well, it does, right? It looks like a different type of rally, just different flags.
Yeah.
Whether it's the way the Democratic Party slavishly is devoted to this hateful entity, whether it's the plans that the U.S. effectively had that preceded Trump, and yeah, let's be honest, preceded Blinken also. All of these guys are war plans, right? Yeah, this stuff is rather outrageous. And I guess the operative question is, How does it change?
What do the American people do? That's the question. Because it comes back to the people, we'll end to this. What do the American people do when they realize that the illusion of democracy, the illusion of control of the masses, the illusion that they even have any input evaporates? What do the people do? Do they just sit on their laurels and take it, or will there be some kind of pushback? Jamal Thomas, tell everybody where they can find you online.
Well, thanks, man. Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'm on Jamal Thomas. That's my channel. I appear 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. I also have shows over the course of the day, so definitely check me out.
All right. Thank you very much, Jamal Thomas. Everybody, coming up next, we got Dr. Jack Rasmus. We got another hour, and then we're going to be doing all kind of fun stuff. We're going to at some point jump over to Rumble. Garland Nixon standing in for the one and only Jimmy Dore. We'll be right back.
So get this, Larry Fink, you know who Larry Fink is. He's the guy, he's the boss of everybody. He was a failure at first. Yeah, he bankrupted his first company. Then he invented BlackRock, and he's such a criminal, he now runs the world. So those are the people who run the world, criminals. Listen to what he says. You are going to be financing these data centers. Let's listen.
Americans to think about growing with the United States. We will have far than enough money to invest in this infrastructure.
So when he says we have to convince Americans to grow with the United States, he means we have to convince them to give us their money, their retirement, the money that they have in their 401ks, so that we can then put it into these data centers.
But as the governor was talking about, the need for electrons is growing every day. Some of these, if we're going to be the leader in technology, which we are, if we are going to be the leader in AI, which we presently are, it's just going to require trillions of dollars of investments. And if we don't invest in it, China will be the global leader in this.
He's inadvertently telling us to move to China to save our incomes.
It sounds exactly like what he's saying.
And so to me, it's not whether. This is a must. And if you think about how that translates, it translates into a more dynamic economy. We need the United States economy to grow at over 2%. We need the U.S. economy to grow at 3%, especially with the growing deficits the federal government has. And so much of this money, not just the projects, is going to be coming from the private sector, from savings accounts, from pension accounts, from insurance companies, and on and on and on.
We just said that they're going to take it from your retirement accounts and your savings accounts. And as George Carlin said, they're coming for your Social Security.
Hey, everybody. It's time for some super chats. How enjoying the first hour of our show, I hope. Jamal Thomas, excellent guest. Garland Nixon, we're very happy to have him. Our next guest coming up very, very soon, any minute now. Very excited about that. Sound Chaser, our first chat out the gate. NDAA bill has a section in it giving Israel a seat with DOD in the Pentagon, Congress, military. What's next? An Israeli VP? Yeah, that's terrifying. Thank you, Sound Chaser. Mr. Natural said, bored of all this lying. Yes, I think that's in regard to our title, right? About Trump is bored of the Iran war. And Mr. Natural is bored of all this lying. Me too, Mr. Natural. Let's see. Brad Gilbert. Garland, WTF, Jimmy's show starts on time means a guest host. Always throws me off. Hey, sometimes we start on time without a guest host. Sometimes we do that. And as you know, Jimmy's 15 minutes late is still starting on time for Jimmy. So we start on time. We start on time, Brad Gilbert. I resent what you've said. Nat the Cat Williams, GTSY here, Jamal. And I'm sad I didn't read this while he was still here. I thought it was early in the morning for a minute there. LOL. Hashtag Insomnia Chronicles. It sounds like we have a Jamal fan in the chat. Next up, Brad Gilbert is back. Venezuela was staged. Maduro is CIA asset with 4 costumes. EMPs take out lights, but they don't prevent guns from firing. All the world's a stage. IYKYK. I don't know what IYKYK is. I'm not going to try it. I don't know all the acronyms. I feel like I just learned FOMO. So this is too much for me. Thank you, Brad Gilbert. Nat the Cat Williams is back. If we allow Congress to merge our military with you know who, that's 1.5 trillion at their disposal. And Nikki too gorgeous. Thank you for the tip and the cute little emoji situation. Sound Chaser, if the Jewish religion teaches that Jews are God's chosen people and they believe they are better than other people, how good is it gonna get? Oh, hold on. Sound Chaser, I'll be back. I have a note. IYKYK. If you know, you know. Of course. If you know, you know. I should have seen that. I'm embarrassed. I'm a little, I think I need more electrolytes today. If you know, you know. Thank you, Malcolm. And back to Sound Chaser. If the Jewish religion teaches that Jews are God's chosen people and they believe they are better than other people, how good is it gonna get? FR. And I don't know what that part means. And their God will return to destroy their enemies? ? And on that one, thank you, Sound Chaser. Apologies if I didn't read that correctly. And we're going to go back to Garland.
Well, hello there, Misha. All right, we're going to have right now a buddy of mine. And do you want to talk about a guy that really knows economics? Dr. Jack Rasmus. Dr. Jack, how you doing? I don't know if it's me or you. Look, you're looking about as dark as me there, brother. How's it going?
Let me turn some lights on.
There we go. Good old Dr. Jack Rasmus. Let me tell you about Dr. Jack. Dr. Jack is a professor of political economy at St. Mary's College and a prolific author known for his critical analyses of neoliberalism and the global economy, including The Scourge of Neoliberalism and Epic Recession. He currently hosts the weekly radio show Alternative Visions on the Progressive Radio Network and writes frequently for publications such as Z Magazine and Counterpunch. Dr. Jack, welcome.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, we got a lot to talk about here. At some point, we've got a pretty bad situation that looks like it's arising from the Straits of Hormuz. So at some point, Dr. Jack, as bad as I want to avoid this, I'm going to have to ask you, how bad is it going to be and when does it start? But right now, I just ate before I started and I might not make it through. I'm feeling nauseous already. So why don't we start by going in another direction? Breaking. The proposed U.S.-Iran peace deal includes a $300 billion reconstruction fund for Iran, per the New York Times. The program is being called an international investment fund, which the U.S. would facilitate in the final degree. The U.S. will always facilitate it, huh? This comes as Iran demands reparations to end the war. Dr. Jack, why do I feel as though that ain't quite what it appears to be?
Well, one of the demands of Iran has always been that the U.S. has to pay and Israel pay reparations, right, for the damage that they've done. I see this as the Trump response to that demand, saying, oh, okay, well, we'll talk about if you open the Hormuz Straits immediately and don't charge anybody anything for passage, right?
Yeah.
$2 million per ship. Don't do that. Drop all sovereignty on Hormuz. We'll talk with you about maybe putting together this nebulous investment fund after the fact, right? To help with reparations, which really means that, the U.S. is going to get involved with the businesses to and get a big cut of that. A lot of that $300 billion, if it ever appears, but it won't. If it ever appears, that will go right back to American companies and Trump and the U.S. So it won't be that much. But this is a typical tactic of American imperialism here, to try to dangle a little positive bite here, to get the other party to do what they want to do. We saw that happen after the Anchorage deal, with Putin and Trump, right? His two Trump's two forward men there. What's his name?
Witkoff and Kushner.
Witkoff and Jared, right?
That's right.
They had a bunch of meetings and everything. Nothing came of the peace deal, but I'm convinced they were there trying to talk some kind of financial deal with the Russians to say, let's cut a deal. And you do this in Ukraine, and we'll cut a deal with you, and you can make some money back. That kind of a thing. This is what these guys always do. They're always hustling, right?
Remember this, Dr. Jack? One of the things in Anchorage they said was, well, the Russians got this $200 or $300 billion that's frozen. We'll put that into what? An investment fund. And Donald Trump, not the president of the United States, Donald Trump will be in charge of all of it for all of territory. And he was just there. So it's the same thing
It's the same thing as the peace board there in Gaza, right? He runs the peace board, and there's going to be reconstruction there, quote. And he's going to get a big cut. You see, he likes these investment fund deals because he and his sons are in on the deals. All the details, fine details, the companies that get created to get a piece of the pie, right? He's always got his hands in all these investment deals, and they never really materialize. So it's just a tactic to try to fool the Iranians, which I don't think they're going to be fooled. We'll do something about your reparations and the damages after you open the fund. Then we'll talk about investment fund, and that will be manipulated by the financial guys, like Kushner and Witkoff and all the other criminals. It's a repeat. It's a repeat. The same thing happened when he tried to sell this thing about the Ukraine minerals deal, right?
Yes,
it's the same thing over and over. So it's phony. It's phony.
You know what it sounds like, Dr. Jack? I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger. We know where that's going, right? For a hamburger that I will eat today.
Going to have to promise Iran upwards of $300 billion.
Wait a minute. What's that?
That's called finance capital negotiating.
Exactly. All right. Now let's listen to a great man of peace. I'm being facetious. Here's Jake Sullivan. I believe that's Jake Sullivan. It looks like Jake Sullivan.
The United States is going to have to promise Iran upwards of $300 billion. Barack Obama was attacked for a $1.7 billion payment, and now we're talking about $300 billion. The reason I think President Trump is looking at taking this deal is he does not have a good alternative. He tried to bomb Iran, he tried to blockade Iran, he tried to bully Iran, and he is stuck. So this may be the best of the very bad outcomes available to him, and it just shows you what a misbegotten war this was from the beginning. The United States is going to have to promise Iran upwards of $300 billion.
Dr. Jack, the other thing is that's interesting about these discussions about giving Iran money. Well, like a lot of this money, Iran paid to the United States back when the Shah was in and said, hey, we'd like to buy some fighter planes and things from you. And the U.S. said, sure, we'll take the money. And then all of a sudden the Shah wasn't there and the United States said, yeah, we'll keep the money. But now when you listen to the neocons, it sounds like somehow they were graciously holding on to this money for Iran, and Iran's Iran's just asking them to give them money. Actually, they're holding on to stolen loot from Iran.
Yeah, and that's how they'll provide the collateral for this deal, right? They'll give Iran their stolen assets back, right? As part of this $300 billion deal. And of course, they will participate, meaning Trump and his finance capital Zionist buddies. They're going to profit off of this. It's always how you make money off of something. That's all it is. It's all a grift. It's all a big grift.
Well, Dr. Jack, in the context of this so-called money that we're holding for Iran, that's something that's never discussed. Wherever it's held, I don't know, JP Morgan, Chase Manhattan, right? Let's say it's 24 billion. Let's say it's whatever with the Russians, tens of billions, whatever, right? That money's sitting somewhere. And wherever that money is sitting, people are taking loans out against that money. People are investing it. So $24 billion of Iran's money, if it were given back to Iran, there's some neoliberal grifters that's actually making a fortune off of that money. That's why I believe they'll never give the money back, because they have loans out against it. They probably sold asset-backed securities against it. They're making a fortune off that money. They can't give that money back if they wanted to, Dr. Jack.
Yeah, that's why the Europeans won't give the $260 billion of Russian frozen assets back to them. They'll use it as a collateral to give loans to Ukraine. And that's why the Venezuelans never got their stolen gold or their businesses back. And even now, they won't get it back. I mean, once that money is grabbed by the capitalists, I mean, they just, as you say, it gets entangled in the whole investment networks that they have. And, for them to give it back would be to disrupt the whole thing and to reveal who's behind all the theft and everything. So it's not going to be given back. It's a, Sullivan, whoever this guy was, he says, promise. Trump is going to promise. The U.S. is going to promise. I mean, the Iranians are going to believe any promises from the U.S., I don't think so at this point. I mean, they promised not to bomb them back June, and of course they did, right? The U.S., makes concessions as a temporary tactic, and treaties are a temporary tactic. When the relationship of forces are not in the totally in the empire's favor, they'll try to freeze the situation a little bit and make a treaty or make a concession here and there. But as soon as the relationship is back in their favor, they break it. The U.S. has broken 250 plus treaties over its history. Treaties don't mean a damn thing to the U.S.
Dr. Jack, my understanding is that over the course of history, say African countries, what were considered developing, which was a metaphor for we're not going to let them develop, but developing world countries, the U.S. would go in, the West, the IMF, whoever, and say, we're going to lend you whatever, $100 million for development. Oh, really? How's that $100 million get spent? American companies are going to come in, and the money is going to go to American companies who say, we're going to build a road, and they'll charge you 10 times for a road, and they'll just leave it and it's never built. Oh, yeah, they're going to build power plants. American countries come in and they build power plants that don't work, or they're never finished, or they're sitting in the middle of the bridge to nowheres. So historically, when the U.S. would go in and they'd have some puppet government in who would sign off for the loan, American companies would come in, and then let's do this even worse. The American companies would hire Filipino workers or workers from some other country to work for nothing. So the people in the country didn't even get jobs. And once they'd stolen all of the American loans into the hands of American companies, they'd go back to America and they'd say to the African country, you owe us for these loans. And if you can't give it to us, we're going to take your airports that we just built that don't even work.
Yeah, well, you described what the World Bank does, provides project funds. The IMF bails out countries that have currency problems, currency instability. But, that whole strategy that you just described is a way of exploiting the World Bank and the empire, U.S., exploiting these countries because that money, a lot of that money to these countries for projects, infrastructure projects, never leaves the U.S. It goes, as you say, right from the U.S. Treasury to U.S. companies. But, a good example is it's not working in Africa. China doesn't put all those strings attached, right? And now China, Belt and Road and everything is, out competing the U.S. in Africa in particular. The World Bank's in trouble in Africa, right? They're being outcompeted by the Chinese. And who knows, maybe South America is next. But it's a good example of how the institutions of the empire are not as successful and as efficient as they used to be. In my forthcoming book, Twilight American Imperialism, I look at about a dozen of the key institutions of empire and also the key practices of empire, what empires do, military, economically, and so forth. And very clearly, the empire is declining because these practices are not as successful and the institutions are underperforming compared to how they used to perform in the past. On top of that, the finances of the empire are reaching a breaking point. So, all this talk about, we're going to do this and we're going to do that for you. whether it's Iran or Africa or whatever, is just, part of the attempt of the empire to maintain its hegemony. And it's having a hard time with Iran. They're trying to come up with a formula to fool Iran into agreeing or staying within the empire, right? And Iran is saying no, like a lot of other countries say, no, we're going to go our own way. One of the fundamental developments in the 21st century is that the global South has really industrialized, and it's really economically increasingly independent now, and the empire cannot squeeze it as it used to in the past, when it was totally dependent on dollars, totally dependent on the World Bank and IMF and all the rest, right? They're not totally dependent anymore. And you can see it in G20, right, going on. But, these other countries are saying we're going to be independent more, and we're going to choose our own way. And that's the bigger picture here going on. Iran's one of these countries, and what's going on with Iran and with Venezuela and so forth is an example of the empire desperately trying to pull them back in some way. And if not, try to whack them on the head, because in the past that worked, right? But the whacking doesn't do so good, because, you can build all these aircraft carriers you want. You can build all these fifth generation fighter aircraft that you want, right? But with the change in military technology and asymmetric warfare, these things are neutralized, right? And the U.S. has not kept up with the change in asymmetric warfare here. And you see Iran with, their drones and their underwater drones and, whatever else they got, missiles, etc., pretty much neutralized, all these aircraft carriers and all these big surface ships, sitting ducks.
Dr. Jack, I think this 300 billion story with Iran is the perfect example. Let me explain. So the U.S. is saying we want to do a fake 300 billion, and we'll pretend like the money's going to you. We'll launder it through all of our usual. What's that? Yeah, exactly. We promise you 300 billion, and whatever amount it is, we will launder it through our own companies and fill our own stinking, filthy, greedy pockets, and then you'll get the shaft. We'll get the gold mine. You'll get the shaft, right? Here's the problem. And was it, I forgot the guy with the New York Times that said you can't have McDonald's without McDonnell Douglas. In the past, the U.S. would make you an offer you couldn't refuse. Country A, do you want to take this offer? No, well, then we'll blow you to hell and kill you. And they'd have to take it, because the F-14 Tomcats or whatever would come in and blow them up. So in the past, we were gangsters, but gangsters got to have the gorilla. They got to have the guy that comes in and breaks your legs if you don't take the deal, right? We don't have the gorilla anymore. The mafia now says to Iran, take the deal. And Iran says, who's going to make me? And we can't make them. So the fact that we don't have the kinetic capacity to militarily dominate Iran means these fake, phony, however many billions of dollars to deal, that they're not going to get any of it. We can't install the puppet government. We can't throw the government in there out, and we can't threaten and dominate them. We can't even come in within 1,000 miles of their coastline with one of our ships without getting sunk. So this is the perfect example of why that neoliberal fake loan process doesn't work anymore.
Well, loan process is just the economic side of imperialism. The other side is the military side, what we've been talking about. We see it. They resort to military means when the economic means, no longer work as they used to in the past. The economic means is you disrupt the economy with send the CIA in there, and you deny access to currency, dollars, because you got to have dollars in the old system to buy oil and all the other commodities, right? That's breaking down. But deny their access to dollars, block their exports, deny sanctions, deny their imports, disrupt the economy in all kinds of ways. And that's how they used to do it before. And they've tried still to do that. They had some success in doing that in Venezuela. But they tried to do that in Iran, but it really didn't work. Why is it not working? Because once again, we come back to this fundamental fact that the global South is independent, increasingly economically. They are industrialized enough that they can trade with each other, and they are arranging trade arrangements, and they're able now, because they could trade with each other. Before, you get chopped off from the empire. You economically atrophy, now there's an alternative, and there are alternative institutions, the Chinese and the Russians and the BRICS and MIR and all the payment systems, and this is the fundamental challenge to the empire, that now you've got a place where all these increasingly independent, self-sufficient countries can go and survive, other than having to trade and deal with the West, with the core. The core of the empire is the G7, right? And then there's a periphery of it, and then there's the rest of the world, and then there's the BRICS. So what's going on today is the 21st century. It's the fundamentals are different, quite different than they ever were before, and that's what the empire's having a hell of a time dealing with. The economic pressures don't work, so they resort more to military pressures. That's Trump. That's Trump resorting to military pressures in lieu of, and in combination of. They're not trying to abandon their economic levers, but they're resorting more to military measures. But that's expensive. You see, that's extremely expensive, which gets to this whole question of how much is the empire able to afford, given the way it's structured globally. You hear all this $960 billion budget for the Pentagon and defense. Well, Defense Department's actually more than the Pentagon budget, but they don't tell you about all the other defense expenditures. We're spending almost $400 billion now for Homeland Security, over $100 billion for the CIA and intelligence agencies that we know of, right? How much are we spending for past wars here since 2001? Veterans Affairs, $400 billion, right? 30 some billion to produce new weapons, new nuclear weapons. Then you got all these bases, and then you got all these alliances and military assistance going on. And then what about the Defense Department share of the national debt, which is a product of all the deficits, which the war spending is a big part of? That's hundreds of billions a year now. Their share of the 1.1 trillion payments on the national debt that's going to bondholders, which are big corporations and wealthy individuals and countries, right? And then they don't say anything about the black budget. There's a secret black budget of advanced military equipment that does not get into the public record of the budget proposal. Wow. This is negotiated between a handful of people running the military committees and the Pentagon and the president advisors. This is a secret fund, and I looked at it. It's hard to get information on it, but I got some information almost a decade ago. And a decade ago, it was $75 billion a year.
Whoa.
What is it now? We don't know. So if you add it all up, it's $2.2 trillion we are spending on wars and defense this year, 2026. And now we got Hegseth wants $200 billion more for overseas contingency operations to pay for all this stuff going on in Iran. That's going to be added to the already 2.1 trillion estimated deficit this year. And then you got Trump in his next budget saying, I need $500 billion more just for the Pentagon.
Wow, we're at $3 trillion.
The empire cannot afford, as it is structured now. It cannot afford. We are seeing the twilight of the whole. It's a long process. It's not happening overnight. I don't agree with those progressives who say, the empire's collapsing. No, it's not collapsing, but it's in trouble.
Let's talk about something else that's quite interesting, and that is, let's see. I am actually On the wrong, you will forgive me. I'm struggling to make sure that I get to the right. Okay, there we go. The White House intervened to get a $620 million deal for a company tied to Donald Trump Jr. About 3 months before the Pentagon announced plans to lend money to Vulcan Elements, Trump Jr.'s venture. When the Pentagon announced a $620 million loan last year to a small North Carolina startup linked into Donald Trump Jr. Defense Systems, and the company tried to tamp down suspicions of cronyism, the president's eldest son said through a spokesperson that he wasn't involved. The Pentagon said Trump Jr. played no role in the record-setting deal, and the startup's founder told reporters that his company, Vulcan Elements, received no political favoritism. But interviews and Defense Department records viewed by ProPublica shows the request to loan hundreds of millions of dollars to the firm linked to Trump was made by Peter Navarro, a White House advisor to President Trump and a friend of Trump Jr.'s. Of the dozens of companies the Pentagon was considering funding at the time, Vulcan's was the only deal initiated by a top aide to the president, said an official at the Pentagon, who, you're going to find this shocking, was not authorized to speak publicly. Dr. Rasmus. But, you know, this is isn't this another sign of a declining empire when they get so brash, when they get so open about this level of corruption? $620 million.
Oh, corruption's rampant, not just in the executive branch, but even in the legislative branch, insider trading and all that going on. But I would like, I've been thinking about this because this example is just the tip of an iceberg. These examples of possible tampering, involvement in corruption here, his family, his sons. I would like to see someone do a research to identify all the new companies that those two Trump sons have created since his father was in office. What are those companies? What is their position, their investment, their role in these companies? Who are some of the other investors? You find a lot of big tech Zionist investors, I'm sure, right? And identify who these companies are, and then do the research as to, how much of government assistance are they getting? We forget last year Trump announced a $500 billion fund for AI to accelerate AI investments. Means that goes to the tech companies, right? That's what that is. $500 billion. I don't know how. That's probably over a multi-year period, whatever. But has that been created? Is there? I'm sure there are all kinds of subsidies from the federal government going to tech companies to help them build their data centers. And who knows what other technologies start up for autonomous weapon systems, right? That's big. And how much is the Trump sons involved in the companies that are getting these subsidies from the federal government? I think you'll find some very interesting developments. And along those lines, I've often thought also, where the hell did all this multi-million-dollar barrels of oil from Venezuela go? What did the U.S. pay for those, if they paid at all? Where did that oil go? I don't think it's gone into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Who's holding that? In what organization in the government is that being held? Who sold it? At what price to whom? I think that's a massive grift going on here, seizing that Venezuelan oil. And I think Trump is involved with managing it because he said, I'm going to control that. Just as he said, I'm going to control the expenses for the peace board in Gaza. Right?
Yes.
He is involved with this stuff. And he uses his son and he uses intermediaries like Peter Navarro and others. Corporations send their lawyers to represent them and on the contracts and everything, But this guy is grifting big time. This small stuff here, I think, pales when you look at probably what's happening with the peace board, what's happening with the Venezuelan oil, what's happening, would happen with this investment fund. I mean, is this just an idea right now, or do they have people on board? So, it's a total grift. And empires and imperialism is always a grift.
Yeah, let's take a look at this video.
Hello.
Hello there. There's so many.
Wait a minute. We're going to get this video. We'll get this video going in a second. We have Glenn Greenwald, if I can ever get it straight. Let's see.
for hours on end. Even giving Kamala Harris an appointation of, I don't know if that's a word, but appointing her as the next candidate because he wasn't able to run. You're America first, right? That's what you're saying, right? Okay, so do you agree that it was corrupt?
So I'm somebody who believes that there was a lot of corruption in the Biden administration. My claim is not that the Biden administration was free of meaningful corruption. It had a lot of corruption. My claim is that the Trump administration has a lot more corruption. And we can talk about what those financial deals are.
Please.
Okay, well, I'll just give you one example.
Okay.
Jared Kushner, who's now running Middle East foreign policy and negotiating Middle East policy for Donald Trump, his son-in-law.
And doing a great job.
Right before he was put into that position just a year or so earlier, he created a hedge fund, and the number one investor were the Saudis, who invested $2 billion in Jared Kushner's fund, both as a reward for a job well done, for the service that the Trump administration in the first term gave to the Saudis, and also for making sure that the Saudis' interests are protected. It's basically a bribe directly to the Trump family. The Trump family created a crypto company called World Liberty Financial, 49% of which is now owned by the United Arab Emirates. We've heard so much here about how important the UAE is, about how Saudi Arabia is, and they're funneling gigantic sums of money directly to the Trump family.
Okay, but look at, I just want to interject a little bit, because look at Nancy Pelosi. Look at all the inside trading.
I agree with you completely.
It goes way beyond that.
No, that's
so
not
both
way beyond
sides
that.
do it. Is it right? No, but Biden administration and all of the people on the Democratic side are doing it so much worse on such a larger scale. It's affecting America.
I worked a lot on the Hunter Biden corruption case, principally that he got $50,000 a month from a company in Ukraine called Burisma when Vice President Biden had immense influence in Ukraine.
It was way more than that.
And as Andy McCarthy said, who's a longtime Republican conservative prosecutor, in order to talk about or compare the corruption, similar corruption by the Trump sons and by Jared Kushner, you have to add 2 zeros to the amounts. And I think that's what the concern is.
Biden was...
It's interesting, Dr. Jack, because there's the argument, rather than people see this as a corrupt system, and I run into that, I do my Pacifica radio show, and I run into that wherein people call and tell me, well, but Trump did that, and or this politician did this, and I always can say, but both the other party was doing this, right? But I don't say that from as well, that excuses it. Somehow, if this person stole $1 billion and that person stole $1 billion, we have to forget both of them. I say it from the perspective of we have a crooked, corrupt system, and it's not a defense. And I think that's what Glenn Greenwald's getting at, is the nature of this system is corruption.
Yeah, well, that lady there, whoever she was, that's a classic rhetorical distraction, right? Instead of answering the question or dealing with the point at hand, you flip it and you reverse it to another question of somebody else, according to an argument you want to make. You don't deal with the question. You ignore it by raising another question that appears to be the same, and people hope that you'll get distracted and start talking about the second question. I mean, that's rhetoric, and you come across that a lot, especially in the media, when you get interviewed by people. So that's the way to keep people ignorant of the facts and try to continue to manipulate public opinion that way. And all these talk shows on cable and all that stuff, that's a constant tactic that they use.
Dr. Jack, if people study the history of imperialism, if they study what was it, what was the big British tea company? You know what I mean? That was part of.
Yeah.
What's that?
Okay. The East India Company.
East India Company, right? The Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. They used to have stores called A&P. If they study the history of this, right, what you'll find is, as an example, all of this talk about pirates, the pirates, most of the pirates work for the British, government, that the nature of empire is corruption. And they, may pretend as though, argue about who's the most corrupt, but this didn't start in 2020, when you look at, we could go back to, just in the last few years, Dick Cheney and what happened with him and all of the money that he was getting with his company. We could go forward to the Clinton initiative and all of the money that was flowing into the Clinton initiative. Jared Kushner is following in the footsteps of some pretty bold people. The Clintons took a whole lot of money out of everywhere. Viktor Pinchuk and the Ukrainian World Congress, all the money that they sent. We see this over and over and over, wherein historically, when you go from president to president, when you go from politician to politician, this is just the way the game's played.
Yeah, well, the U.S. is more sophisticated in banana republics. In banana republics, they steal while they're in office. And, of course, Trump's doing that, too. He's a banana dictator. But if you look at people like Clinton and also Obama and Biden, whatever, how did these presidents end up multimillionaires? I'm talking about $20, $30, $40 million once they leave office. How did they do that? They don't have that money when they go in. Well, in America, the American way is you reward these presidents if they've done a job, and sometimes even senior bureaucrats like central bank presidents, the chair of the Fed. You reward them in a whole number of ways. One way is you set up 15-minute speeches to business conferences where you get paid $250,000 each time you make a speech, right? $250,000. And even when you're running for office, like Hillary got in on that too, you were given book deals where you were paid up front millions of dollars, and businesses agree if the book doesn't sell to buy the unsold books from the publishing company, right? That's another way, the favorite way they do it. You get to set up foundations, and people make all kind of contributions to those foundations that you are able to collect expenses from. Right, that's another favorite way. You're given preferred economic deals, like Obama. He had a nice deal there, to make movies. He didn't make many movies, but he's good. I mean, how does he buy his nice place on Martha's Vineyard? All of a sudden, right, when he's out of office. And the Clintons, talk about corruption. The Clintons are really, really corrupt. They're in everything. We know book deals and speeches and everything like that. And then there's other more nefarious ways in which they're awarded. I mean, going back to Ronald Reagan, when Ronald Reagan left office, right, he was half demented anyway. But big corporations made it an arrangement for him to give a 10-minute speech in Tokyo that the media didn't know about, and he got paid $6 million for a 10-minute speech.
Wow, that's good money.
Yeah, people don't know about it. There's all kind. We reward these people who delivered while in office once they leave. Now Trump's broken that mold. I mean, and so did Biden with the Ukraine. He's using his son to get the money, but. This is the way it works. We are turning into a banana republic. We're stealing while we're there. Mr. Trump is, really the case example of that. But we've had long history of rewarding and making multi-millionaires. I'm not talking about 2 or 3 million. I'm talking about 30, 40, 50, 70 million dollars that these people are worth, right? Once they leave office. And there's all these gimmicks on how we reward them once they leave office.
Well, I guess Trump figures he's not a young man. He doesn't have time to wait. He's got to make his now. All right, now let's move on. Oh, look at this. The UN must. Now this is Marco Rubio. The UN must open the Strait of Hormuz for us, Rubio. For the UN's got to do it for us. Are they going to send the blue helmet guys in? What is the purpose of the UN? The UN was supposed to be a place where you could peacefully resolve global conflict. You got to laugh. We're taking it to the UN. They're always telling the UN they don't have to listen to us. Or they're saying that they want to blow up the UN or burn down the UN. The U.S. condemned the UN for years because the UN wanted to peacefully resolve conflicts and objected to American and Israeli wars. The U.S. must be in dire straits of Hormuz if they now beg the UN for help. Dr. Jack, we got a little video here. Let us try to see if we can check out our video. I had a little video here. All right, let's go.
I think it's a real test for the UN, right? As something that functions that can solve global problems. What is the purpose of the UN? The UN was supposed to be a place where you could peacefully resolve global conflict. Right now, you have a country who is unlawfully, criminally, and illegally taking possession of an international waterway and blowing up commercial vessels and putting mines in the water. I don't know if people appreciate like how outrageous this is, how unacceptable it is that any country would fire and try to sink commercial vessels or put mines in the water. Both of these things are illegal. And so we're going to take it to the UN, and I think it's a real test for.
Well, let's start here, Dr. Jack. The United States right now owes money to Nicaragua because we illegally mined the Nicaraguan harbors in the 1980, and the UN decided that we needed to pay them, and we're never going to pay them. Right now, Israel is blowing up half of Lebanon and stealing the country. No problem. Let them do that. They can actually killing civilians and taking the country. But we've got to go to the UN because they've got to stop these people. They just blew up shot at a tanker whom they warned and fired warning shots at before they fired at it. Dr. Jack.
Yeah, well, it's kind of ironic, when you listen to what Rubio's saying, and then you think, well, didn't Trump essentially tell the UN to go to hell, and he set up a parallel peace board in Gaza? I mean, his own UN. He set up his own UN with him in control of everything, including the money, right? And the U.S. owes the UN $4 billion. I mean, under Biden it was $2 billion. Under Trump it's $4 billion, and now he wants to go and he wants the UN to come up with a decision, right, favoring us. I listened to what he said and I said, well, what if you in his speech just changed out Iran for Israel? Would he feel the same way in that speech? Because it would have been exactly the same thing, even worse, right? Genocide and at war with 4 different countries on its border. I mean, it's all hypocrisy, going to the UN. I think that's just buying time. You see, I think the U.S. is just buying time here to put more pressure in whatever way it can on Iran. The U.S. doesn't want a deal with Iran. You can't get it. It can't get a deal with Iran because its demands are, you got to give up all of your nuclear fissionable material, right? Secondly, you got to totally abandon the Strait of Hormuz, right, and make it the way it was before. And then, the other demand is, what Israel's doing in Lebanon has nothing to do with this, right? Do you think, Iran's going to agree to any of that? That's why it's all phony. All this stuff about a deal is phony. Trump keeps saying, a deal is imminent, and then he threatens Iran in the next breath, right? How many times has he tried to talk down the markets and the price of oil since April 7th, right, by saying, a deal is imminent? I'll tell you, 13 times. 13 times he's talked down. And, of course, the price of oil goes, spot oil, not the real price, goes from 110 down to 90, 95, Then it drifts back up when it's apparent, then it goes back down, right? 13 times. This is all about trying to control the price of oil because he knows he can't get a settlement. I mean, even if Iran agreed to the Hormuz and the fissionable material, you still got Netanyahu able to scuttle the whole deal over Lebanon, right? And he will. There's not going to be any deal there. This is to buy time. I've been thinking about this, and I think that Trump believes if he can keep the price of oil around $100 a barrel, right, until November, right, he thinks he can still win, right? How is he going to win with inflation and the price of, $100 barrel oil? And he'll try to keep it, bouncing around here. Well, I think he thinks he can win for 2 reasons. One is the extreme gerrymandering going on in the House. Right? Estimates are that the Republicans have gerrymandered somewhere between 12 and 15 extra seats in the House for themselves. The Democrats, as always, behind the curve, they got about 5 in California and I don't know where else, couple here or there, right? So they're going to get 10 seats, 10 more seats, I also believe that Trump believes he's going to pass the SAVE Act, and the SAVE Act means you can't vote by ballot anymore, and you got to go to a location, you got to show proof of citizenship, which means he thinks that that's going to help him on a few more seats in a few more locations. I think he believes that he can wait it out. He can wait out Iran by just keeping it where it is now. If he can keep the price of oil, in the 100 range and do these other things. So I don't agree with all this talk about, Trump is really behind the 8 ball. He can't, the economy is going to collapse and he's under pressure and he's got to do something about it real quick. He's desperate, right? He's desperate. I don't think he's so desperate.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Jack. You're the man who would know this stuff technically. What's coming? How bad is it going to get? How soon is it going to get that bad for us and for the U.S.?
Bad in what sense? Economically?
As far as economically bad, depression, recession, gas stations closed, for the U.S. and for Europe.
Well, Europe's another question, but as far as the U.S. is concerned, we got to wait to see in July, August, right? Because that's when the real crunch comes with global oil. All this talk about oil at $100 a barrel, whatever, that's the spot price of oil. That's 60 days from now. That's not the real price of oil. The real price of oil is $20, $30 a barrel more right now, right? And we see the price of gasoline that's gone up 50% so far after 90 days, 50%. The regular gas in the U.S. has gone from $2.92 to $4.65, something like that. It bounces down a little bit up and down. That's $1.50 a gallon. That's for regular gas. That's not for unleaded that most people buy, and it's not for diesel that the trucks got to use. Right out here in California, the price for a gallon of diesel is $8 a gallon. $8 already. You don't think that's not being passed on by the trucking firms carrying food and all the other things? That's the primary reason why your food prices are going up, I think. It's just the transportation costs, right? And then we have other costs that have to do with utilities and electricity and insurances and so forth. I'm waiting for the third quarter to see what happens to the economy as a result of what's going on here, in the second quarter here. I think they can get through the second quarter. I think the third quarter will really tell us what's going on. And it's not good. They say that the consumer price index is 3.8%, which is going up rapidly from what it was a couple of months ago. But that's an underestimation, you see, because that price, you got to understand from an economics point of view how those price indices are methodologically determined and the assumptions in them. They are structured to lowball the actual inflation, especially the PCE is much worse than the CPI. But both of them, the PCE is partly determined by the CPI. It's just a hodgepodge of methods that they come up with this thing, and they lowball it. Actually, inflation around 4% officially right now, CPI. I think it's more than 6%. If the methodology, like a good example is interest rates. Interest rates aren't included in the inflation indexes. No, they're not included, and what's going with your credit cards and your mortgage and your autos and all that stuff, right? It's not included. There's all kind of other gimmicks that underestimate the cost, the actual inflation rate. I'm not going to get into it. It's too technical and everything, but bottom line, you can add 2% to the inflation rate and very comfortably, and that's probably more like what it is. And it's going to go up. There's no way it's not going to go up. And when it goes up, you can already see the impact on real spending, right? When you got to pay more for prices for gas, you're going to pay less to buy real things. And the price of gas, inflation, is not factored in. It's supposed to be adjusted poorly, but adjusted some in your GDP, your real economic growth, right? But you can already see it. New auto consumption purchases are really down. In a whole number of other areas, they're down. Things that people ordinarily would buy, food and so forth. So it's already having an impact. But we'll see in the third quarter how serious that impact is. Is there
a potential, or I'm sure there is, but will you look at this at some point and say some kind of 2008 style crash that it could transfer from simply, a physical thing where you can't get aluminum foil and you're buying on gas, so you can't go to Disneyland. Does that transfer at some point to there was 635 layoffs, to the deflation and things of that nature, where we start seeing the structural breakdown of our economy?
Yeah, well, that question really suggests that the real economy has an impact on the financial side of the economy, right? That was a financial crash that froze up the bank system that led to mass layoffs, right? And a collapse of the real economy. That's how that process. I mean, the real economy was weakening before 2008, but that accelerated it and caused the crash. And then, Obama didn't really put enough stimulus into the real economy to get it going. And we limped along for 5-6 years. We didn't recover the jobs we had in 2007 until 2015. And then the jobs that recover were at a lower wage than the jobs that we lost, So I don't see a 2008 subprime mortgage crash imminent, right now. It won't, in any event, it won't be from subprime mortgages. It'll come from another area. We've seen a little bit indication of that in February, where we had some of the financial markets take a big contraction, a dip, right? All of a sudden, it became a worry. What's AI going to do to all these traditional software companies, like Salesforce.com and all the others? Yeah. They're in trouble too, right? And those prices took a big dip. And then we had a dip in the gold price and a dip in the other financial asset prices, because all these financial markets are really substitutable. Investments in financial assets are substitutable. You can go whatever one you want. So we saw a contraction back in February, but it has recovered some since then because of the massive boom in AI investment. Just the 4 largest AI companies. Tech companies, I'm talking about Google and Meta and Amazon and whatever, are investing $750 billion this year alone into AI. A lot of into data centers and, chips and so forth. $750 billion. I don't believe they're going to get a return on that very soon. That's too much. 550 last year, 750 this year. Who knows the next year? It's a big bubble. It's a big bubble going on, and the big tech companies are going to make a potload of money, but selling AI solutions to the smaller non-tech businesses is going to be a bust. But they'll make big money trying to tell these other companies, we got professional services that'll help you transit to AI. But I saw one survey that said 77% of non-tech CEOs are asking or are doubting that they're going to be able to make money off of AI. 77%. That means they're already worried. They don't see how they can make money. And if the base can't make money off of AI, all this big bubble, in tech on the top is going to go bust. But in the meantime, these CEOs and these senior managers of tech companies, they're going to get filthy rich off of this because the stock prices are going through the roof. But it's all a scam. Not all of it is a scam. I'm not saying all of AI is a scam. It's going to result in a lot of jobs being lost. And by the way, it's not only going to disrupt the employment at the end of the process, but even now it is causing all kind of disruption all the way up the management chain, all the way up to the VP level. People don't know who's going to have a job, who's going to get whacked, and who's going to still be around. It's disrupting everything. And I think at some point you're going to get to investors saying, well, wait a minute, where's all this $750 billion? How are we going to get a return? How soon? At what rate? Well, maybe we ought to pull back. Then you will see the S&P 500 and NASDAQ and the stock markets take a dive. Then you may have what you're talking about. But that's all speculation. And it's not this year, maybe next.
Well, we've got wars, we've got Straits of Hormuz we got to keep closed down, and we've got Russia that we've got to keep them from doing whatever in the world they're trying to do. So we've got lots of other all kinds of terrible things around the world that we have to do. And last but not least, we've got to contain China because, you know, that little old economy over there in China is nothing. The U.S. We just surround them with a couple of $13 billion aircraft carriers, and I'm sure they'll fold up like a cheap folding chair.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, a good indicator, Trump goes to China. What the hell did he get out of that? It's not clear he got anything out of that to China, but he gave them the most advanced U.S. AI chips. Now, why the hell did he do that, right? Why the hell did he do that and didn't get anything coming home? Nothing on trade, nothing on tariffs, nothing on, you know, next generation military technology. He got nothing. So why did he do it is the question. And subsequent to that, what did he do? The U.S. was pushing Taiwan to buy $40 billion of U.S. arms. All of a sudden, it said, no, you're only going to get 14. Was that part of the deal with China? What is the U.S. getting out of China is the question. No one knows at this point, but there is some kind of a deal or understanding, it wouldn't be put in writing, made. But to me, that tells me that Trump and the U.S. empire is so preoccupied with the Middle East and trying to extricate itself out of funding Europe's next wars, right? And trying to put its house in order in a Western hemisphere, that it's decided, you know, we just got to hold the line best we can in the Far East, and we got to clean up the Western hemisphere, and we got to continue doing whatever Israel wants because, you know, the Zionists, both homegrown and foreign, own the U.S. government now. So
yeah, I think your last the last part of your evaluation was probably maybe one of the most pertinent right now, and one of the many reasons that the U.S. is dragging, you know, our economy and everything else is dragging straight to hell. And I'll end this segment like I did the last one. At some point, it comes down to this: what do the people do when they realize that when the illusion of democracy and constitutional order, the illusion that they have some say in their government, what do the people do when this illusion evaporates and they're like, you know, I think we've been had. We don't get any say. That's one of these days it's going to come to that, Dr. Jack.
One of these days it is, but in the interim, I don't see much change from the Democrats saying, well, the thing to do is vote for us. Right? Vote for us. And they have no solution to the wars or anything else. It's all anti-Trump. Well, they lost the last couple elections with that strategy. And, you know, I believe people have to come to before they come to your question, they got to come to the realization that being sucked back into the Democrat Party is no solution either. The Democrats would continue this war, you know, on behalf of Israel, just as the Republicans are. Both of those clowns are controlled, are bought and controlled. So, you know, but that's how they keep us, you know, like mushrooms, you know, feed us shit and keep us in the dark, right?
Thank you very much, Dr. Jack. Dr. Jack Rasmus is a professor of political economy at St. Mary's College and a prolific author known for his critical analysis of neoliberalism and the global economy. Everybody go to jackrasmus.com. You can see all of Dr. Jack's great books, his writing. You can keep up with his radio show. Dr. Jack, look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody. I'm Garland Nixon standing in for Jimmy Dore. Coming up next, we got a real sharp guy. Larry Johnson, former CIA, and the guy who maintains a great website at sonar21.com. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Garland. And thank you, Dr. Rasmus. Those were great segments. Yes, we've got Larry Johnson coming up. Very excited about that. But right now we're going to go to Rumble. So the link is in the YouTube chat pinned there for your convenience. We will see you over there, everyone.